Good afternoon, Ms. Anderson. Thank you for having us today. My name is Duncan, and this is my colleagues Alex and Carol, and we work global consulting. Thank you for also bringing me statements here today. As being a member of the senior leadership team, our recommendations to your review today extend beyond the ITs and towards the overall business strategy of Rumsey Resource Supply. With Rumsey Resource Supply currently at a crossroads, our implementation today aims towards creating long-term sustainability and towards sustainable operations through ERP systems. For today, I'll discuss the company's situation, current issues, as well as performance stakeholder analysis. I'll then pass it off to Alex, who will discuss our decision analysis as well as the alternatives for our solution. And finally, Carol will discuss the implementation plan that we have for you today, as well as some of the risk and mitigation that we have. So first up, the issues that are facing your company. You have inefficient manual processes in place. You've previously tried to move towards an ERP system, but have reverted back to the ways that you had before, using Excel as well as manual communications. You're currently understaffed in many of the areas of your operations. This is in your sales, your procurement, as well as your shipping. And you had to move staff members from other teams in order to fill these roles. So that is an issue that's facing you. As well as with an expected growth of 20% per year over the next 5 years, you're currently at a very interesting point at Rumsey Resource Supply. We want to make sure that you have a sustainable operation for the future. Our recommendation to you will be to hire more employees, to have a warehouse by warehouse rollout of your ERP system that we will discuss further in our implementation plan, as well as back-end automation and technology department. Ultimately, we wish to maximize the technology and the human resources of Rumsey Resource Supply while having a framework for continued growth, as well as in increasing your return on investment for the next 5 years, ultimately leading to long-term sustainability. So the question that we ask for you today is, why did you have to implement the ERP system in the first place? The value of SAP for your company is that it allows for a full integration between the 3 business functions, your sales, your procurement, as well as your shipping. It's an information system that is updated in real time, providing information across all these functions and allowing your employees to be enabled and having the right information for when they're doing the work. It has the capacity and capability for expanding your growth. You've mentioned to us that you expect to have 20% growth for the next 5 years, and having an ERP system in place will ultimately provide advantage to this. And it removes unnecessary steps in your process. You're currently going back and forth between your various business functions, which is inefficient in its operations, and it's not going to be sustainable, as it doesn't allow you to do proper quality assurance in your shipping, as well as looking at your returns and your procurement, and as well as automating and simplifying the entire shipping process. With a sunk cost already of $2 million in an SAP project, this isn't a waste. It's a salvageable value in terms of you have an SAP application that is customized towards your company's goals, as well as having the personnel for your 3 SAP consultants in order to roll this across. And it's through the implementation that we have right here for you today that is going to ultimately bring that ERP implementation into a full implementation for your company, unlike the previous one. The current situation is that you're managing the supply chain sales processes manually through the Excel spreadsheets and a paper trail. And it's not going to be sustainable, as you want to make sure that you have track for all of this information, as well as with so much growth in your industry right now, you want to make sure that you're able to sustain that. As well as we mentioned before, with the expected growth of 20% per year, we need to make sure that you have the ERP system in place for this. And then you have troubles coping with the current amount of work, as mentioned, through your sales, where you have to bring in members of your SAP implementation, and through your procurement, you're not able to do your returns properly. So in order to do a proper analysis for your company, we've done the stakeholder analysis. We first look at your staff. Your employees were abandoned during the previous ERP implementation when your previous vice president of IT had left. We hope that that isn't the case for this, but with our implementation plan documented, we hope that we're able to roll this out soon in the next couple of months. Your warehouse staff have minimal computer skills. We want to make sure that our ERP implementation addresses these concerns. We want to make sure that their technical expertise is put to good use, but their technological use will not handicap them for the implementation of the system. In terms of your customers, you have 200 independent customers right now that have critical impact to your company, and they're highly dependent on this updated procurement information. So we need a proper ERP system in place. With your managers, you're pushing for potential sales growth as well as increased sales growth over the next few years. And from your shareholders' perspective, having just been bought by a private equity firm last year, they're expecting the continued growth and success of run to resource supply, and we want to make sure that that's addressed. In order to do this, we look at the challenges facing our company. How can run to resource supply increase the productivity and promote future growth in the company, despite the previous challenges with the ERP implementation? In order to do this, we've taken a look at 3 pillars of people, process, and technology. For the people perspective, these are the staff and employees at your company. For the process, this is how we're going to implement it. There's the 2 options of going with the status quo and keeping your own business operations, and the full SAP implementation. As we previously discussed, we want to have a full SAP implementation, and our entire decision and alternatives will incorporate around that. And through the technology, this is how it's going to be done. Encompassed in all of this is the culture behind your company. You have staff that have worked with you for 15 or 20 years, and we want to make sure that these staff are treated well and respected in this process of the ERP implementation. We were left behind in the previous implementation, and we want to make sure that that's not going to happen in the future for Runway. I'll now pass it off to Alex, who will discuss the alternatives in each of our 3 pillars and our recommendation.
Thank you, Duncan. As Duncan mentioned, we're basing our recommendations today on 3 different pillars. The first one being the people. Currently, the people situation in your enterprise is that your people, there's an uneven knowledge between the salespeople, and also the procurement people, and the shipping people. So we want to make sure to level the playing field and make sure that the technology and the implementation that we're going to propose today will level the playing field and allow your company to grow sustainably in the future. Also, it is critically understaffed in critical areas, such as the quality assurance program that you have. So, as you notice, you have boxes stacked inside of the warehouse. So we want to make sure that we fix this problem and we ensure high quality service to your customers. So in order to fix this challenge that we have on the people side, we have thought of 2 different alternatives. The first one would be to hire more employees. By doing this, it would allow us to increase the sales and to keep up with the demand that keeps rising. At this point, as you have noticed in the previous couple of weeks, the demand for your product has gone up significantly by 15%. By adding new employees, this will allow to offset this increase in demand. Also, by simply adding new people to the current organizational structure, we're not making significant changes to how the business operates or even how the manager handles their employees. What we're doing is adding additional capacity in order to address this demand. And the current workforce daily job is not impacted. We're not changing the jobs, we're not changing the work that gets done, we're just adding. However, it comes with increased initial cost, but we do believe that this would be offset by decreased sales. There are alternatives to consider. We need to retrain the current workforce. This is obviously a long-term project. This couldn't be done in the short term. This would allow to retain your current staff and make them as valuable when we're turning into this 21st century. A lot of your workforce currently doesn't have the technical capacity to use computers in their daily workflow. So we want to make sure to address that in the future. The saving in time that this training would bring to your employees would allow to offset the increase in demand. It also allow you to address all those the backlog QA. And we would also increase productivity in the warehouses by retraining the current workforce. This leads us to the second pillar. The second pillar is the process. Well, right now, we're at a crossroads. You have spent $2 million on this SAP implementation, which is twice as much as your yearly profit. So it is a quite substantial amount of money. So we want to make sure that this time around, when we do implement the SAP rollout, we do it the right way. There's 2 different ways that have been highlighted for us to roll out this SAP implementation. First one will be warehouse by warehouse. By that we mean it's a phase of implementation. This will allow the implementation staff to focus exclusively on one warehouse and make sure that it is done right, once and for all. Because one problem that was noticed last time is that the consulting was spread then across all the organization, and this led to a problem where the system wasn't used properly and it wasn't started right away. And this is why all the company has to go back to the previous practices. And this would also ensure no company-wide disruption. because you have customers that are relying on your parts for their daily operations, such as oil and gas companies. They need those parts in critical moments, so you need to make sure that your entire company is still running, albeit at a slower pace, but still running to fulfill those needs for your customers. The second alternative we have here would be a company-wide rollout. Well, obviously it comes with a couple of drawbacks, such as, again, it could potentially lead to massive disruption in the supply of parts to your customers. And also the spreading of your consultants a bit too thin across your organization. Because at this point, our main assumption is we only have 3 consultants, and we want to stay with those 3 consultants because we don't want to create additional costs that we use. This leads us to the third decision problem, technology. The current technological environment in your company has been quite great. I mean, you have done significant progress in implementing and rolling out SAP. However, this came with inadequate training, which led to the misuse of the system. So, and also, another distribution of technology. The people in the office have been using technology for a long time now. However, people on the floor in the warehouse haven't been using technology, haven't been exposed to this new system or any kind of system whatsoever. So we want to make sure that this time when we do roll it out, it's not. So we have 2 different alternatives. The first alternative would be the warehouse 2.0. This would be to extensively use technology in order to increase efficiency and have increased sales and at the end of the day increase your volume. The first thing would be to provide handheld devices to all your employees to scan barcodes and make sure that all the warehouse is automated and everything reports back to the central system. Maybe later down the road in the future, have RFID tracking of items to make sure that we know where the stock is physically present in the warehouse. And also maybe something to consider in the future, robotize or automate the warehouse where the product comes to you or to the people that load the trucks, like other companies have been rolling out across the world, FedEx and UPS. The other alternative would be the back-end automation. Since we do understand that your employees in the warehouse don't necessarily have technical abilities to use computers, we want to make their job easier, use their capacity to the fullest of their extent. That would mean having a system where stations are installed, like in self-checkout as you see in shops, where items would be scanned undoubtedly and also undoubtedly. This would be extremely simple for the worker. No significant retraining would be required. However, all of the back-end operations would be happening outside the site. So essentially, the worker would not have to deal with a complicated computer program. It would simply do their task as they used to do. However, being led by the feedback and the intel coming from the SAP system. So our different alternatives are weighted by decision makers. We have 3 different criteria for weighting decision. The first one would be the impact on operation. Since a lot of your operations are mission critical, since your customers need parts on a just-in-time basis, we weighted this as heavy as your current human resource capacity, which is your employees and making sure that they're adaptable and willing to accept the changes. And the third consideration is obviously cost. You already sunk $2 million on this project, so we want to make sure that you don't incur unnecessary additional costs and make sure also to salvage as much as we can the previous SAP implementation. And weighting all those different alternatives, this gives us a good decision to hire more employees, have a warehouse implementation, which is phased, which we'll talk about later in the short-term implementation, and also have a back-end automation, which will keep the technology simple enough for the workers, yet powerful and give intelligence to the senior management to effectively grow and sustain the whole business. So again, recommendation: hire more employees, warehouse control, and back-end automation. Now let me pass it off to Carol.
Thank you, Alex. As my colleagues have highlighted today, RUMC is at an interesting standpoint. As we have concluded, the previous ERP implementation did fail, primarily because your VP had left the organization. So right now, we're not only here to resolve that issue, we're also here to make sure that RUMC is positioned to take more capacity and more growth in the future. To do that, we have looked at a recommendation with the 3 decision pillars, being people, process, and technology. By having an innovative and creative solution abilities and successes of your employees. With that, you can have a successful rollout with effective leadership and management by ensuring that the entire implementation team stays together and has consistent communication. And you want to update the current technological backend processes to increase your efficient operations. This, in effect, will increase and fuel the productivity for Rumsey at this point. Looking at some of the financials, we've allotted change management, which I'll get to in a little bit. We've also allotted some expenses for temporary workers to move over the data that is in your current systems to the new ERP system, as well as 8 full-time employees. The 8 full-time employees is divided into 2 individuals per warehouse. You stated that with the previous consultants, they were very limited and they were constrained since they were stretched out so thin between the 4 warehouses. So by ensuring that you have 8 full-time employees, they are there all the time to provide the support that is needed. And of course, also integrating the technological piece of the barcode scanner and software integration. A critical piece for this plan to succeed will be the change management, because not only are you bringing change management for what is to come, you're also needing to explain why your previous ERP system didn't work. A lot of your employees won't understand exactly perhaps the reasons why it didn't work, but they knew that you had moved, they had gone back, and so why are you pushing it again? So it's so important to re-engage those stakeholders and have that open and honest dialogue. You don't want to hide anything at this point. You need to have an open and honest dialogue with your employees to make sure they understand the benefits and the value. And we strongly encourage that you engage your executive team so that the entire executive board is engaged. This change does not only affect the MIS technical side, it affects your entire organization. So you need to have that executive on board. The second piece is acceptance. So creating the communications plan, including town halls, newsletters, whatever you feel will be most effective to engage your employees, to let them know what is happening and how this will change their day-to-day. And you may have some obstacles, but making sure you create those short-term wins so your employees know that if they adapt to the new system, you're really, you have an environment that encourages that. And finally, ownership. You're integrating change into the company and applying lessons learned. It's not going to be perfect, we recognize that, but you want to take the lessons learned and reapply it as you see fit continuously. This is the short-term implementation that Alex alluded to earlier. So as you can see, we have the phased implementation. In the first 2 weeks, you will be doing initial change management at the awareness stage, the data audit and the beta test all simultaneously. Then you will have consequent 1-week rollout per warehouse, and then you will evaluate the effectiveness of the entire rollout. In terms of long term, you want to continuously evaluate the current implementation. As we said, it's not going to be perfect, so you want to make sure that those lessons learned are applied. You want to continue training and skill upgrading with your current employees to making sure that they are evolving with you as your company grows, and evaluating future use of technologies. Alex mentioned a few, and we see that as a viable opportunity for you in the future. Some of the risks that Alex and Duncan have both identified, first of all, is that employee distance. They're not going to understand immediately why you're doing this change and why and what value this brings. So by having that incentive program for the transition, you are making this a little bit easier, and having an effective change management program is going to be essential and crucial for your new change. The second piece is that there may be order disruption. By doing it warehouse by warehouse, you're really limiting the impact of centralized disruption. You're going from one place to the other to ensure that everyone, the disruptions are weighted. And finally, there may be technology failure, but by doing redundant beta testing, we see that this is a very minor risk. The next immediate steps, we want you to meet with the executive team, and we want you to communicate with the SAP consultants that you had hired on this initial project. Since there is a considerable impact, we want you to get engaged immediately. So this comes round circle to why we were asked to come here in the first place. We have addressed the issues of your inefficient manual processes, your expected growth over the next 5 years, which currently leads you to unsustainable operations. By hiring your own employees, using a warehouse-by-warehouse rollout, and backing automation, you're enabling growth. Thank you so much for inviting me today. We hope you for any questions you may have.
What
having your organization be centralized right now in Calgary, we want to make sure that Calgary is the first site. You have your VPs there, as well as bringing in your consultants. You start in Calgary. Going up to Edmonton will make sense in terms of you're working in similar industries across this. And moving out east, we would next go to Saskatoon and followed by Windsor. So ultimately, we want to start at home base with Calgary and Edmonton before moving to the other warehouses.
We would expect that you would take most of the project management perspective of the change management. So the $10,000 we've allotted is primarily $5,000 for incentive programs, so rewards to the employees, but also allotting some freedom for expenses such as printing, creating videos, whatever you feel is necessary and would apply to your change management strategy. So it's not, it is not the cost of the employee, it is the cost of the materials and the incentive program.
Similar question around financial aid. So you're showing kind of an estimated budget for $35,000. Calculating with yourself that, you know, we have a private equity or they're concerned with profits. This is a pretty big expense. How do you manage it?
So you've demonstrated in the previous year that you had $1 million in it, your net profit. But with 20% growth for the next 5 years, as well as you've already invested $2 million in these operations, we're hoping that your cost currently at $6 million can be brought down efficiently through the implementation of the ERP. You're going to be able to cut down on the cost of implementation, or the cost of going between parties, as well as any of the errors that you have in your current processes. Sometimes you're setting up trucks that are 20%, 30% full, and they're not being efficient, as well as you're having order errors. So by reducing that, those costs, we're hoping that the profit can increase, and that through time, through the hiring of these additional employees of this worth of $35,000 cost, in the long run, this is going to bring gains for your company. We don't have solid numbers right now, but working further with your company, we hope that we're able to have a sufficient operation budget as well as profit for your company.
Your schedule, you have 2 weeks left for the change management. Is there a reason that you're not going to cost all stuff over outside of change?
Well, we do feel that we have a very problem right now. We need to re-implement this SAP as soon as possible because the employees are disgruntled. Obviously, they tried the SAP and they did it. And we do feel that we need to close this contract with the consultant first, and the sooner we do the better. And we would suggest right now to start this change management. If you accept it.
The way that we've structured it 1 week by 1 week, we feel that by really bringing all the resources together. So previously you had one consultant go out to every warehouse, and they really wouldn't do a full training. So by structuring it and putting your implementation efforts together, that is consolidated, when you go week by week, it is a much more structured format for training as well as for development. And of course, the change management will be happening throughout the entire rollout of all of your companies. So those items working in tandem will make every week more successful and more efficient in the